I'm curious how much your classical studies inform your writing sensibilities. Well, quite a lot, actually, in the sense that the classical musicians, the musicians we call classical musicians, unlike the jazz musicians, I'm using those terms lightly with salt added. Is that how you say it? What's the phrase I'm looking for?
Loosely.
Loosely is one good way to say it, yeah. The classical musicians and composers especially, they took the time to make games, which is write compositions down for other musicians to play. So they would make the game. Bach, Mozart, all the ones we love. Debussy, Ravel, and then also the jazz composers, Duke Ellington, Thelonious Monk, Horace Silver. I think they used written music. The jazz musicians tend to use less written music, but they do fix a song and they do fix an arrangement. And some get quite elaborate about it, like four of my favorite orchestral pieces of music. Actually, four of my favorite recordings of all time are the Gil Evans, Miles Davis recordings that were done in the 50s. And Gil Evans there, he used a palette of a large orchestra. Well, brass and reeds mainly. He didn't use violin. He didn't use strings in that. So the classical composers, they wrote things, they fixed things, and they wrote things down. And that is the tradition that that I learned, that I take from that way of organizing music, because I enjoy working with ensembles. Even a duet, actually. Like when I work with Bela Fleck as a duet, I've done duets with Stanley Clarke as well, where we write our music down to learn it first. So we send each other music. So we do use written music, but then once we understand the piece, we don't need the sheet music anymore. But the classical musicians and composers have used their writing styles to make longer compositions. And that, for instance, is part of what I've done with Future Suite. Future Suite is it's a S-W-E-E-T, of the sweetness of the future, but it's also a S-U-I-T-E suite, meaning that it's built in sections. It's actually got what, I use a fancy term, it's got a recapitulation, which means that the melody in the beginning comes back in some form at the end. It recaps. We now use it recap. Yeah, I took a lot of, I learned a lot from the classical composers. I still do. I'm currently involved in finishing up a trombone concerto for the great trombonist for the New York Philharmonic, Joe Alessi. And he invited me to write this concerto for him and the New York Philharmonic. And when I understood that I had this great orchestra with these amazing musicians and organization to write this musical game for, which I was not given any instruction what to do, except I got together with Joe and we talked about it a little bit, but basically I composed what I liked to compose without any restrictions. And knowing that I had that orchestra to work with, I started studying, once again, the classical composers and how they orchestrated. And I went to mainly, actually I went to mainly my biggest inspirations orchestrationally and musically also, which is Bela Bartok and his three piano concerti, his concerto for orchestra, and all his orchestral works. Stravinsky has a huge body of orchestral work that is just some of the most imaginative music I know, and very interesting to study in terms of the combining of sounds. That's what orchestration is, the combining of sounds, where you put the woodwinds together with the strings, together with the brass, together with the percussion, and so forth. Those were my main go-tos, Stravinsky and Bartók. I also pay a lot of attention to Mozart's orchestral writing. His piano concerti, especially, are written so beautifully. The way he uses the chamber orchestra. He doesn't use a lot of brass. He'll use a trumpet, or sometimes he'll use some woodwinds and strings mainly, and a timpani. So yeah, that's what. Oh, it's over here. That's what I do.